Well, good morning, everybody. This is Brian Dayton with the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank everybody who's joining us today for this webinar. We have two special guests who have made time out of their very busy schedules in Washington to join us today. And so this is a real treat because this allows members of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce the opportunity to interact with two of our leaders here in West Virginia. We're very pleased to have joining us Senator Shelley Capito and Congressman David McKinley. In both Senator Capito and Congressman McKinley were instrumental in passing the very much needed bipartisan infrastructure package through the U.S. Congress. This has been infrastructure, it's been decades in the making. This was strongly supported by the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce, our colleagues at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as well. And so we brought them on so they could talk about what is in this bill for West Virginia and how it's going to help our state in so many ways. So first, I'm going to introduce both of them and then kick it over to Senator Capito for some opening remarks. So Senator Shelley Moore Capito was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in the year 2000. In 2014, she became the first female to represent West Virginia in the United States Senate, winning all 55 counties, and she was just reelected to the Senate last November, again winning all 55 counties and securing over 70% of the vote. She serves on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, where she is the ranking Republican. She also serves on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, the Committee on Appropriations, and the U.S. Senate Committee on Rules and Administration. Congressman David McKinley was previously the minority leader in the West Virginia House of Delegates, and in 2010, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from the 1st District. He was just reelected to his 6th term in the U.S. House this past November. He's been a great friend of the chamber. He serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and he is the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Environment. He also serves on the Subcommittee on Energy and the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. Again, on behalf of the West Virginia Chamber, I just want to convey our sincere thanks to Senator Shelley Moore Capito for being really one of the first people in working in a bipartisan fashion to craft this very, very important bill, and to also give very sincere thanks to Congressman David McKinley. He, along with 12 of his Republican colleagues, are the reason that we have this bipartisan infrastructure deal that is going to do so much for West Virginia. He was a real leader on this issue, and so we're so pleased to have both of them joining us. So I just want to go ahead and first off, turn it over to Senator Capito. So Senator, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. And I want to thank the West Virginia Chamber for sponsoring this webinar. It's great to be on with you and Steve. I know is there, and he has laryngitis for the 2nd time. He says, and I've been trying to kick something that our grandchildren very generously gave us over Thanksgiving. So I hope he gets rid of that. But I thank him as always. Steve's been a great leader at the chamber, and you've been very helpful. It's great to be on with David. David has always, as we know, he's an engineer. We don't forget that. But David has always been a great advocate for physical infrastructure. He understands it probably more deeply than many of us. And so I know that David's vote was well thought out, and it's been tough, I think, unfortunately, for the folks on the House side, the Republicans that voted for this. But honestly, every single day I can defend this vote, as I know David can. This is so important to West Virginia. I'm just going to talk for maybe 2 or 3 minutes on why my involvement was much greater than maybe some folks know. I am the ranking member on the Environment and Public Works Committee. I'm the lead Republican. I began with my framework, the negotiations with the president. I believe firmly that good things can happen here. Good things are more roads, more bridges, more infrastructure, all the things that are contained in a physical core infrastructure package. I broke that off from the president's larger package. And went to the White House and said, let's negotiate, and ask them what they thought of our framework. And honestly, the president came back very eager to engage. And so we did engage for about 6 to 8 weeks. And it became clear after probably 6 or 7 weeks that we weren't going to get it all the way across the line with the negotiations that we were doing, although we had significant progress. We also had at the same time in my EPW committee, two major bills that are the significant building blocks of this bill. That's the highway bill, the 5-year highway bill, and then another 5-way reauthorization of the safe drinking water and wastewater bill. Those are really, and those were unanimous out of our committee. I worked with Senator Carper, my chairman, to craft those. Lots of good things in there for West Virginia. There's great formula funding for the state for the roads. There's dedicated funding for the bridges, which was my piece of this. There's dedicated funding for quarter H, $195 million. There is a special emphasis. We had that problem in Clarksburg with lead in our water. There's a lot replacement of lead pipes. There's also rural set aside in the highway portion so that rural America can get the attention that we need to have to improve our highways, our safety, and build upon that. Yes, there is a climate section in here, but it is such a reasonable part of the bill. It deals with resilience of materials. It deals with being able to withstand weather events. Things that we see in West Virginia are really important. How many times have David and I gone to a disaster site in West Virginia and seen a piece of highway moved or a bridge totally destroyed because it wasn't engineered with the kind of disasters in mind. So the other thing I will say, and then I'll turn it over to my buddy David. In the broadband area, you all have heard me talk about this a lot with my Capito Connect plan. There is significant for West Virginia, over $100 million. And the prioritization are the people that we still have in West Virginia that are unserved and underserved, or unserved and unserved. And those have to be served first before any of these dollars go to any other kind of upping other people's speeds or deploying to certain business areas. And so that to me was extremely important. This is I think our opportunity to really get that full broadband deployment. Post-pandemic, we see how important it is. So with that, there's all kinds of other things, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the bill that are important to West Virginia. But for me, I am just very proud of us working together to get something done. I think in the end of the day, people want to see us work together and get things done that are in the best interest of everybody. So David, I'll just say, take it away, and good job on the House side.
Thank you, Shelley. But listen, before we go any further with that, I think all of us can applaud the good news last night with WVU beating Connecticut and Marshall winning down there. So this is a good night for West Virginia. So what's that phrase play? It's a good day to be a Mountaineer wherever you are. Right. So we came out well in this, but I think any opening remark that I should make, thanks Steve and you in the chamber for promoting this event and helping out at the national level on this, is also to thank Shelley because it began in the Senate. And where I get offended, and frankly, Shelley, I've said to some people, when they say to me, it's got all this infrastructure bill has all this social spending in it. It has tax increases. It has whatever. I don't want to even support the conversation. I say, are you telling me you think Shelley Moore is going to put some social spending in an infrastructure bill? Well, then they said, well, no, probably not. I said, then you got to trust us. You got to trust Shelley. She's been around enough. She understands what we need to have. And as she pointed out, from an engineering perspective, the U.S. Chamber has already put out a paper that said that 100% of this bill is infrastructure, hard infrastructure. And to put it in perspective for Brian and you and Steve, is I've been waiting 11 years. 11 years I campaigned on this. I know as an engineer, and Shelley mentioned it. Did I tell you, Shelley, I'm an engineer? Okay. I've designed bridges, roads, water, sewer lines. I know how bad the condition is. I'm a member of I'm a fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And when I go to our meetings, they tell me about how West Virginia is ranked the worst in the country. U.S. News and World Report came out and said we ranked 50th in the country. So 11 years later, they blocked Obama. Obama could not get his infrastructure bill passed. And then under Donald Trump, he tried to get infrastructure. In fact, he had a $2 trillion, not a $550, a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. And it never came to a vote. So here, the first time in 11 years, I'm going to say, am I going to play politics? Or are we going to do what's right for West Virginia? And Shelley and I talked. I was getting calls from the governor. He wanted this bill passed. The Mayor's Association and Municipal League in West Virginia wanted the bill passed. The county commissioners, their association called, they wanted it passed. This was a no-brainer. This was a vote for West Virginia. This was to help these problems we have so that we can address these problems with it. And broadband, we all heard the stories over the last 2 years during the COVID when it was in its worst, where the kids were having to go to the fire halls or going to libraries to get a Wi-Fi connection because there wasn't one adequate at their home to do their homework. That's got to stop. So I'm really applauding President or Governor Justice to putting together this package now that we put it. I think we're going to start with $100 billion or $100 million into West Virginia, but we're going to leverage that so that he's got a program now that's going to put for broadband up to $1 billion in West Virginia over the next. So I'm delighted that this thing's passed. I think it's long overdue. I really applaud Shelley for leading the way over in the Senate to be able to get something. There's no spending in this on tax increases with it. This is going to go to help communities. I've worked with the Public Service Commission when we talked to them about the impact it's going to have on small towns that can never afford. Like I'll give an example. One, if I could take just a minute here, is Paw Paw, West Virginia. Little Paw Paw, West Virginia. Shelley knows where that is. Paw Paw with 230 customers. That's it. It's that small. And Paw Paw, West Virginia, when we got a call from them, they've been cited. They have $11.5 million worth of water improvements, or they're going to be fined. Now just think about that. That's $50,000 per customer. Families are going to have. This isn't right. They can't do it. And Charlotte Lane was very clear. We'll never be able to improve a water rate to be able to do it. We need this influx of money to take care of it. And you and I know we're one of the lowest per capita incomes. We're one with wealth and the like in West Virginia. We're never going to be able to provide enough resources to Paw Paw or to Kaiser or to Farmington. This bill helps our neighbors. And so I'm very proud of that. So I look forward to it. I think it clearly came down as Shelley knows, they were trying to make this a political issue. No, this isn't this is a vote for West Virginia and our neighbors and our communities to help out. So I thank you all. And Shelley, again, thank you for what you've done.
Well, thank you both. I just want to remind everybody who's watching today, if you would like to go ahead and ask either one of them a question, please type your question into the Q&A box, and then we will go ahead and go through those questions. We have a few here that we're going to go ahead and start with to get the conversation rolling. But just to our members, this is your opportunity to ask questions directly of Senator Capito and Congressman McKinley on this very important subject. So if I can just go ahead and ask the first question, and whichever one of you wants to jump in and take it first, have at it. But what will be the first thing that we really see here in West Virginia as far as, shovels hitting the ground? Will it be airports, roadways, broadband? What do you anticipate as far as that?
I would say the first things are going to be the highway and bridge money, because these are long-term, large projects that this 5-year window of this bill really affords the governor and Jimmy Riston, who's head of our DOT, to be able to pursue long-term projects, whether it's moving towards completion of Corridor H or working on King Cole Highway or Coalfields Express or Route 2 congestion. So I think the broadband money, unfortunately, is going to lag a little bit, and here's why. And I think you all will understand this. We do not have accurate mapping as to where all the broadband is deployed and where it isn't. And remember, I said unserved and underserved areas. So I think that the broadband money is predicated in this bill that we have to have the new maps, the accurate maps in place. And that's going to be 6 to 8 months. Frustrating for me, yes, frustrating for David too, but those dollars are going to lag. On the water side, a lot of that money is going into the revolving funds that the Infrastructure Council. So this will plus up there, that will be immediate. I mean, we've already announced, I think it was 68 million more dollars. Was that what it was? 68 million more dollars into the drinking water revolving fund. That will come quickly. I think some of the airport money, because it follows into, it really inflates more money into existing programs. And I'll just say that in short, anything that has an existing program, like the formula dollars, like the money for the airports, for control towers, those are going to flow much, much quicker. Where you're going to have a little bit of a lag is when there's a new program that's been created, and one that would be created would be cleaning up orphan oil and gas wells. There's money in there to clean up oil and gas wells. The thought there is to try to pull some of our coal miners that are not working and others that have the kind of skill set that you would need. But we don't have an existing program for that. So we have to create that. That's going to be a lagger, but we do have permitting reform in there, by the way. I know that's important to everybody on the highway side. That was one thing I really pressed for. We got the one federal decision permitting, and that's going to help this money smooth out much, much quicker in the roads and bridge area. I don't know, David, if you have the same perspective on what comes first.
I think it mirrors a lot of what you just said. I had a meeting with the over in Randolph County and Elkins on Monday, and what I wanted to hear from them is what were the issues that are holding them back, because I think the highway money will be the first, and Corridor H, they're just screaming to get that finished. Corridor H, it's just so we had a very good meeting there, and they were talking about permitting process. And I think thanks to Shelley and the Senate, what they've done with it, they've streamlined the permitting process. So we think we have that's going to move things along faster. But now we also have additional set of money that they've been looking for that they've not been able to put into it. So I think the highway money will be the first. I think and also because the highway department they've already paid for a lot of designs. Their bridges and roads already designed. They just didn't have the money for them. That's a process they do down there. So it's on the shelf. So once we get this money, they're going to be able to move on. Same thing with water and sewer lines. We've already identified. There's a report out by the assessment from the water conditions. It was done by the Public Service Commission, and they already have identified where the problems are of water across West Virginia. And shockingly enough, Brian, what they say in their summary, if you looked through it, they're talking about 18 billion with a B, $18 billion worth of needs in West Virginia on water and sewage. But fortunately, they've outlined them. So we know in each county where we need to be putting the money. So thanks to this program, we're having money into the state revolving fund. We're going to be able to move that money. And we've already had the conversation with the governor's office about how, and with Marie Provioso, about how we might be able to help out a town like Paw Paw or Farmington or Kaiser or Wellsburg. What do we have to do to get them? Because some of their water systems are being held together with duct tape. And I just walk away from it amazed that I don't think the American public fully grasps how we've done so much with so little. So I think that's going to happen. Now, the other is, I'm hoping, I don't know whether it can move as fast. Shelley maybe referenced it a little bit, is over flood relief. West Virginia, every year, we know that. Just look in the news every spring in West Virginia, the flooding that takes place. In this bill, well, let me just back up just a little bit. Washington typically, through the insurance through FEMA, focuses their attention on coastal from hurricanes. But we've raised hell about that over the years, that the problem that we have across the country is not coastal. It's what happens on the inland waterways. What happens in the flash flooding in our creeks and our streams and our rivers, to be able to take care of that. In this bill, they're addressing the inland waterway areas to be able to whether it's flood walls, whether it's dams. We know we talked with the conservation district. There are 170 conservation dams that need upgraded. We're going to be able to do that. So long term, what I really like in this bill is how we're going to prevent people from having the annual flooding in their communities, and that if any of you have been around it, I've endured numbers of my parents, we've lost cars, we've lost a home in it. The stench, the mud, it's just so disruptive to people. We've got to eliminate that. And in this bill, we have some provisions for it. So it's very broad-based, but those are the things I would be looking for. Roads, water lines, and the flooding, take care. But don't overlook what Shelley said about the broadband. She has been a leader in broadband. When she was back in the House, that every time when she would take the floor, I knew that was going to come out. It was, did I tell you about broadband? And that's where Shelley came from. She has been a champion of this. So getting that in there is very important for us.
Well, thank you. We've now have several questions in the queue. This next one, I want to go ahead and start with Congressman McKinley, because it's in the new 2nd Congressional District in the northern part of the state. It's from Ray Smith, and it says, with $190 million to Corridor H, do you see other monies opening up to help finish that project? And I know you just talked about it when you went to Randolph County last week. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how this can help Corridor H?
Yes, I think they're going to be able to get more than that. The governor we've heard enough that there's going to be other money that might be available for that. Because keep in mind, Brian, one of the things that happens with this is that we want the synergies of also the Hyperloop project. And the Hyperloop project is very dependent on having good road access into that. So not only for sewer and water line, but also having Corridor H and having that road finished. We also have got some dynamics that are coming into play, working with the Pennsylvania congressman and Trone out of Western Maryland, having a north-south access. They call it the north-south corridor, coming from Pennsylvania through Cumberland, down through Kaiser, and connecting to Corridor H, so that we can have in the Eastern Panhandle some real growth by having access to people to get their products to market. So there's other money. What I'm trying to imply here, there's going to be other money from Maryland, Pennsylvania that's going to have to build this highway down to connect all of this.
Thank you. Senator Capito, we have a question from Steve Rubin. He just says, this is a tremendous opportunity for the state. I don't think he could be more accurate on that. But how do we ensure that we get the maximum potential from these funds coming into West Virginia and do as much as we possibly can?
A lot of this funding is formula funding. In other words, it's funding that we would, particularly on the highway side, that we would have been able to, that are, as I said, are established programs. For instance, it'll be $3 billion over 5 years and of just straight up highway funding. And I would say, to kind of piggyback on what David said on Corridor H, the governor sets the priorities for where he wants to see his road projects go. That's the way it's done. We weigh in, or he weighs in with us for special projects. And so we need to make sure, through all of the help of folks on the line and everybody with the governor, and they're very open, and we work well with them to make sure we're all following on the same page. I think the last thing we want is a 1.5 miles, like what happened with Route 35. They had a 1.5 mile stretch over by, Coast Guard over in Mason County, and it took us another 21 years to get the other 37 miles. So we want to make sure that, and the governor sets priorities, and so that's why I think there'll be more money into Corridor H from the governor's bucket of money, and he can match too with what he needs to move forward. So I think that you need to use your federal offices. I mean, some of this money, as it's coming through, is going to be grant money. It's going to be, and we don't want to leave it on the side but you have to apply for it. You have to recognize that it's a pot of money that's applicable to West Virginia. And some of these things, we've just put together a guide for our county commissioners, our mayors. It's not a real public document, but it basically is showing these funds. This is how you apply, or these are grant funding, come to our office. I have a grants coordinator. Sure, David does as well, to make sure that we're as supportive as we can be. Some of them are optional dollars. And you know what? If you're not applying for the game, you're not going to get in the game. I found out early on, like probably 8 years ago, that West Virginia was leaving money on the table in the area of drug addiction and substance abuse. They just weren't applying for some of these grants. And we're not going to let that happen this time. So we're going to do active outreach. And I want people to, reach back into us to see, do we fit? Does this work? And we got to remember our communities right now. I had 4 mayors in here I don't know, I think it was last week. They're using their COVID dollars. They can use it for COVID relief. They can use it for water, and they can use it for broadband. A lot of them are using it very smartly because they're using a regional approach to do this water infrastructure issues. They've had stuff sitting on the back burner for years. These are millions of dollars of projects. As David said, they're so antiquated. So we need to make sure that they're tapping into the resources that they have right now and we're trying to get them to be able to use through legislation to use their dollars for road projects as well. But some of it's going to be grant, and we need to make sure we're in on it.
If I could build back off a little bit about what Shelley was just saying, that the first tranche of this first release of money that's coming out is formula driven. Think about what she just said there. We're going to get close to $6 billion. But right. So think about it. Already they've released the monies. First, if we could just go back just a step on when she talked about the opioid money, she's right. We were not getting our fair share of the opioid money because we weren't applying for it. And so we work with SAMHSA. I know our office to work with Shelley, and we put some pressure on SAMHSA on substance abuse and mental health funding. And we're now getting, thanks to some pressure, we're now getting 7 times the amount of money on a per capita basis in other states on opioid addiction problems. That's because we're putting pressure on them and we're getting people to put grants in and working with SAMHSA. So that's working. But now I want to pivot back to how this is going to work. In West Virginia, they just published yesterday, we got the list of the amount of money that we're going to get in West Virginia. I don't know whether people understand. We are now going to be getting the 7th highest amount in the country on a per capita basis. 7th highest. Think that we're going to get, for example, the one that I checked was Maryland. I know some people live over in Maryland, that we're going to get twice the amount of money on a per capita basis that Maryland's getting. And they've got 3 times the population of West Virginia, but we're going to get twice the amount of money on a per capita basis than they are. So things are moving in the right direction. I think the formula that we're seeing people recognize that rural West Virginia, rural America needs help. And so under this legislation, we're going to be able to help them out. This is going to be very effective in getting, so 7th highest amount of money in the country on a per capita basis. I'll take that every which day.
Well, thank you. Our next question comes from a member of the West Virginia Chamber who's also the Majority Whip of the West Virginia House of Delegates, a good friend, Paul Espinosa. Paul probably has a vast interest in this, given the role of the legislature coming up. But his question is, in your estimation, will the deadline for expenditure provide sufficient time to properly evaluate proposed projects, or are the deadlines likely to be extended?
Well, I know we're running up against some deadlines now on the COVID relief money, those have been extended, and I don't know whether those are going to be extended on the COVID relief dollars. On the infrastructure dollar, the deadlines that are set into the bill are not unreasonable, and I think there will be, to answer Paul's question, I think there will be plenty of time for to vet these projects and to move forward. I don't think that those are as tight a deadlines. The COVID deadlines were much tighter because we were trying to react in an emergency situation and push them up. And so I think that is going to be, but I'll give you an example of where I think we need to work with Paul and others in the legislature. In this bill, there is some dollar for some small nuclear, they call them package plants. There's very small nuclear power generators. They're new, innovative. They're not the big, massive plants. And there's a couple of opportunities here, I think, for West Virginia. But we have a law in our state that prevents us from really being able to apply for this because we don't we have a prohibition against nuclear. And so we saw this too on the solar side, and the legislature changed that to open an opportunity. And I saw an announcement maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago where there's going to be 5 solar plants that are going to be all around, around the state. These are opportunities. I mean, I'm still, don't get me wrong, pro coal, pro natural gas, but I think if, anything we can get in the energy space is going to help all of our energy providers. So that's just an example of where we need to really scrub through here and see if we have issues within our state law that won't let us or might prevent us from taking full advantage of this bill. And we'll work with Paul on that and others.
The other, I think, with it is I think the extension could and should be granted on the infrastructure bill as well with these funds. And here's what would be very helpful. And I think Shelley alluded to it a minute ago, was we need to hear from people. We don't have all the answers here in Washington, but if we hear from people that this is a problem, this deadline could cause us a problem, send us a note, and then we can open a door over when the bureaucracies, when the agencies here, and we can write or knock on the door to try to get an extension, so that as they write the regs, that they will allow us more flexibility, because there's a lot of money here coming into this bill as a result of this infrastructure bill. There's a lot of money still, again, from the COVID. So let's make sure that if people have a problem, let us know. Shelley's got a great staff on it. I'm really proud of our staff to be able to respond. Once we hear the problem, we will respond accordingly.
Thank you. Congressman, if I could go ahead and start with you on this next question. It's from David Goldberg, who is the CEO of Mon Health up in Morgantown. His question is there any funding for infrastructure to support healthcare delivery above and beyond broadband? One of the things he cites as a problem is the rural access and age of some of the facilities, but also the roads, when it comes for EMS and patient transport, the road problems there. So would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, David Goldberg is certainly a gem for us in West Virginia with Mon Health. What he has done in working with small hospitals that otherwise would have closed if it weren't for him. He has stepped up and understands how the access to healthcare is important for us in West Virginia, and Mon Health has stepped up to that. So I really applaud him. So some of these issues about healthcare provision, is there something directly that says healthcare in there? Not necessarily. But probably the best is going to be what you mentioned, was the broadband. We've got to make sure, if one thing we learned during the pandemic was the importance of having telehealth to be able to access it. So this is crucial. It's written into the bill about how to expand that to areas that are unserved as well as underserved. So, and we've got a plethora of unserved areas in West Virginia to be able to do that. Now, as it goes to the roads and bridges, of course, I don't have the total like I have for the $18 billion for sewer and water, but I would venture a guess that we have a very similar kind of number for our roads and bridges in West Virginia. How many, if any of us have driven back on those, and I've worked in all 55 counties. I understand how desperate some of our situations are. We've got to be able to get access to our health care, because if nothing else, when we call out an EMS or emergency service, they've got to be able to get to our patient, a person that need within an hour, that golden hour period of time to get them to health care. So we've got to have our roads improved on that than we have right now. Some areas that are desperate with it. So I think that's probably the best answer, is getting our roads fixed and getting our broadband, so that people that don't have access to healthcare, they can do it at least through that process. So I thank you. I know one thing that David and I, Goldberg and I, are working on is trying to figure out ways. It's not in the infrastructure bill, but it's long-term, is how we get more skilled nursing care in West Virginia. So that our nurses are working elsewhere. We're trying to compete with some of these larger municipalities that are paying nurses $200 and $250 an hour. So these traveling nurses, they're taking nurses away from us. And so we need bedside nurses, not only for just everyday healthcare, but we also need it for our drug addiction problem we have. We've got to have people involved in that. So Dave and I are working to try to figure out how we might be able to get more money for nursing care.
Well, thank you. The next question we have here is from Kevin Craig with the Natural Resource Partners. Kevin's also a former member of the legislature, but his is a follow-up on the response from Senator Capito about the nuclear opportunities. But his question is, do we also see a chance for West Virginia to lead in the carbon capture and underground storage technology and therefore extend the life of some of our fossil fuel plants that are in West Virginia? And Senator, did you get a chance? I know you had your screen off for just a second.
Yeah. Can you repeat it? I'm sorry. I tell you what I was doing was I was trying to find out a good example of a grant program that we just were successful with. So in Charleston, the Capito Connector, which is to make Canal Boulevard, more bike lanes and connected a beautiful entrance into the city from the airport, is an example of a US DOT project. It used to be called Build, it's called Raise now. So in both Manchin and I, and if David had been in Charleston, he would have too, have written letters of support. We did one for Route 2. We got one in Route 2 last year. So I just use that as an example of how we can help build those grant applications. But you're talking, so if you could repeat the question, I'm sorry, I was a little distracted, yeah.
Oh, that's quite all right. So the question is from Kevin Craig with Natural Resource Partners, but he was just following up on your comments about the nuclear opportunities.
Yeah.
And we've also, as an aside, we've heard some discussion about a bill in West Virginia to maybe allow that. But the question is, do you see a chance for West Virginia to lead in the carbon capture and underground storage technology and therefore extend the life of some of the fossil fuel plants in West Virginia?
Absolutely. I mean, I think West Virginia is a leader. We have Nettle in Morgantown, and David's been such a great supporter there. And I know has visited numerous times where they're doing a lot of carbon capture and sequestration. In this bill, there is a boost to the carbon capture infrastructure. Why not in West Virginia? I mean, it should be right at the heart of our state, because we not only have the innovation, we have the materials and other things that I think can boost not just the longevity of our plants, but also move towards that carbon, lessening our carbon emissions. I think that that's going to be the direction of the world, whether we agree with it or not. So we might as well get on board and figure out how both coal and natural gas can be, there's all kinds of innovative ideas, like I call it the giant vacuum cleaner in the sky, where they're not even taking it off of the power plant, they're just taking it out of the sky. There's all kinds of ideas out there. And I think West Virginians, actually, we have a lot of research that's going on right now to be the innovator there. And I think that not only has great promise for us, but it's a twofer. It's good for the environment. I created a tax incentive to be able to, if you capture carbon and reuse it, or sequester it, you get it's called a 45Q. It's a tax incentive for these large projects. That's the direction that we're going to be going, that we have been going. Here's the two big issues, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but this is going to be, we have such problems with siting our pipelines. I mean, there is such a national push to prevent or stall or, and I'm sure Kevin is aware of this, any kind of pipeline going through. And we saw what happened to the Atlantic coast. It's now not moving forward. And then we have the Mountaineer, which we're hoping can get completed. And but we can't get our resource out if we don't have pipelines out to where they need to go. So, we've been working on that, trying with, that is such an uphill battle with the advocates up here in DC. The folks that are against it are powerful, well-funded, and they obviously have the ear of the president. And with Gina McCarthy in the suite in the White House, it's really going to be difficult for us. That's one thing. The other is just the unrealistic view that we're going to be able to carry this country on renewables. No, we're not. And, we can see now as it's getting cold, we see coal in demand everywhere and natural gas, because we know the baseload fuel of power generation for our heating, in particular in the winter, is absolutely critical. It's critical to our health. It's critical to our security of our country. And we have a conflict. I don't want to get political here, but we have an administration that says build a pipeline from Russia into Germany, but you can't build a pipeline through West Virginia. So we're fighting that all the time. I mean, David's on the correct committee for that with Energy and Commerce. I'm on a good committee in EPW to be able to help with that. In terms of the storage, we were really big on the Appalachian Storage Hub. We got DOT or DOE involved in that very heavily. I see that as a stalled project right now, and David may have a better view of this right now. It just seems like we were, it's massive investments, and then it sort of hit the brick wall at COVID, and I don't think it's kind of come out of that project. I mean, we're still interested in it, absolutely, but I don't see it as a front burner issue, at least right now. I think carbon capture infrastructure is where we're going to be able to make some real inroads.
If I could, Brian, let me build off that a little bit. Shelley's absolutely right. And the question is right. It has to do with carbon capture, because that's going to be the future of energy in West Virginia, and maybe for the country for that matter. Because if we can capture the carbon from our emissions, then our coal, oil, and gas power plants will be emitting zero emissions. That's going to put them on a level playing field with wind, solar, nuclear, and other facilities. But we're on the cusp. We've been working with Nettle and other universities around the country on how close are we to getting our carbon capture to be cost effective to be able to do this. And so what we have in this legislation, and I thank Shelley because it came out, the SCALE Act is what the SCALE Act is the House version, and Shelley's carrying she's got the companion piece of legislation over in the Senate. It's included in the infrastructure bill so that we can get funds to do carbon capture. If we can achieve this, it's pipelines, it's how we streamline pipelining permitting, how we get the carbon capture out. We're very close to being able to do that, because once we develop the technology of carbon capture, we'll be able to export that technology to India, to China, to Japan, and other nations around the world that are the real bad actors, so to speak, in the emissions affecting the global environmental conditions, because we're burning around 700 million tons of coal in America. China is burning 5 billion tons, over 7 times what we're burning. Ours is much cleaner. I think we can do some better things with this, and we can remove that out of it. So I'm glad it's in there, because it affects our infrastructure. How we're going to be able to power our manufacturing. When we create jobs, we've got to have this effective tool so that we have baseline. So I think it's good to have it in there. And now we just got to finish the job. We're very close to getting it. But Shelley made a point, and I guess I'll put my political hat on for a minute. My problem is folks on someone on the other side of the aisle, though, are opposed to carbon capture. They want to do away with carbon and coal, oil and gas altogether, not clean it up, just do away with it. And so that some of the legislation that they're talking about doing under the Clean Future Act actually does that. We've been able to hold that back. And one of the pieces of legislation we've been working on now for almost 4 years has been a way that we can do carbon capture with not a lot of additional money, but some. But how we find a way to get the carbon capture so that we're not emitting anything more in the atmosphere, and show the world how we can burn our fossil fuels clean.
Well, you've kind of, both of you have alluded to it, and you just did a second ago, just about the political nature. One of the things that we've heard, and we certainly understand the difference between the bipartisan infrastructure plan, again, hard infrastructure, and the reconciliation bill, Build Back Better, that plan. Could you talk a little bit about the differences between those two? Because I think there's some confusion within the public between the reconciliation bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And what are your what are your views on the likelihood of the social spending bill passing?
Well, I guess I'll start since it's already passed the House without David's support, I might add, and rightly so. We are going to get a, well, what the Build Back Better plan is basically a reckless tax and spending plan. It raises taxes. It has a huge new social programs. Now, some of these, if you just polled them individually, they're popular items. More money for childcare, more money for, some parental and family leave, which is one that I'm very interested in. Senior care, expansion of Medicare. All these sound great. These are $1 trillion expenditures. These are things that David and I should be in the room when we're deciding how to formulate if we do want to put a greater emphasis on childcare, if we do want to expand Medicare. Medicare is set to go broke, by the way, in less than 10 years anyway. So, I think that's a real question. So we're going to get at the end of this week a true score. They're saying it's 1.75 billion. A true score is going to show how, if these programs are put into effect, and in the bill, they're written in that they're only going to last 2 years. So are you going to expand childcare availability, or let's just take the Medicare expansion? I think it's for hearing aids. If you expanded Medicare for hearing aids for 2 years, are you really going to come back 2 years later and say, no, we're not doing that anymore? No, that's not the way we do things here. Once you get a certain expansion of something that is provided, it just gets extended, but they don't tell you the true cost in this bill. So what it's going to show is that the true cost is really closer to $5 trillion over 10 years, of which, I don't know, 3.5 of it is unpaid for. So there's that in there. There's also the provision that says that you can get an electric vehicle tax incentive, but if it's made in the United States and it's made by union labor, you get another $5,000. I've never seen a bill where it says I'm not anti-union. It has nothing to do with that, but I got a Toyota plant that is a huge economic driver in this country who sends our transmissions and engines to Canada for assembly. If you bought one of those cars, you would not be eligible for the additional $5,000 tax credit. That's crazy, in my opinion. So they've got that in there. They've got $80 billion of new IRS agents that are going to come in and tell our financial institutions that anytime you have a transaction of $600, that you're going to report it to the IRS. And the goal of this is to generate money to catch tax cheats. The goal of it, in my opinion, is Big Brother's watching you and what you're spending your money on. And that's a big issue for individuals, as you can imagine. I mean, the whole thing is just got it's got green energy stuff coming out of crazy stuff of billions and billions more dollars. After the president said he wasn't going to go back to physical infrastructure, he goes right back into it in this bill. And so it's got all kinds of other issues and problems that I could, get into, benefits for illegal immigrants, all kinds of, political things that are major red flags. No, and now it's passed the Senate, it's passed the House, it's coming over here. The Senate, my understanding is the Democrats in the Senate are rewriting the bill, which means there's going to have to be a couple more votes if it actually gets passed. You and I all know that Senators Sinema and Manchin, and I think there are others that have serious questions about what was passed in the House. They are moving to delay, they are asking questions and all of these kinds of things. I don't know. Right now, today, I don't think it gets passed by the end of December. I do believe that as time goes on and we turn into the next year politically, it becomes more and more difficult to say to the American public, while you're paying more for gas, while your power bills are doubling, while you can't get supplies because our supply chain is very weak right now, we're going to put another $5 trillion worth of debt onto you and your grandchildren. So I I think it loses a lot of its political influence at the local level. And that obviously has great influence on what we do here. So I can't even, I hesitate to really put the odds on it. I think it's 50-50. I still think it could pass if it gets scaled down and some other things get taken out. But I think if you take too much out of it, then you got problems over on David's side with the progressives. They want more. They can't spend enough. And so, that's walking a fine line. I don't know, David, you have I know it's gone through over in the House. What other kinds of perspectives might you add?
Shelley, I think the best thing you said, and Brian made a statement, these are two separate bills.
Right.
There are efforts on too many people to combine them into one and confuse it. And I think the American public is truly confused. I've heard discussions from our own members referring to it as the infrastructure bill having tax increases or having to do with pre-K education. They don't. They apparently it's a big bill. Maybe they've not read it, but we got to there are two separate pieces of legislation here. The one that Chamber has already said, it's 100% infrastructure. Over on this other side, it does have these things that Shelley is referring to. And some of them, I'd like to see it broken out. I'd like to see them, instead of one big comprehensive bill and a reconciliation package, let's debate them separately. For example, one is a pre-K. We have pre-K in West Virginia, and it's working very effectively. What they want to do is they want to do a pre-K across the nation. And I would think that would make an interesting piece of legislation if we could bring it before the committee, have debate, have hearings, be able to amend it and be able to take care of it. But one of the provisions that what they have in their pre-K is going to affect us in West Virginia is that you're not going to be able to get your pre-K in a religious-based institution. And we have in West Virginia, 53% of our children are getting their pre-K in a religious-based organization to do it in a church. So we're going to reverse that. What's going to happen to our kids in West Virginia then with that? So these are pieces of legislation that need to be handled on. I think Shelley went a minute ago on the thing that, what is this methane tax they want to put? We're headed into the winter. We're already expecting, because of shortages, that our gas bills are going to go up about 30%. Now they're going to add another 43%. And in tax on top of this by taxing methane gas. I don't understand the logic. Where's the common sense in this when we're heading into winter? Why aren't we debating ways of opening up our pipelines, continuing our drilling so that we can be energy independent again as we were prior to the pandemic, instead of adding more tax and restrictions on gas so that the consumer is paying more? The Mildred Schmitz of the world, the everyday woman out there and family, they don't want to be paying more. That's where we should be focusing right now, is lowering our cost for heating during this winter, not adding additional cost to it. And she's right. The Wharton School of Business has already evaluated this, and they've tried to take some of the things that Shelley was talking about, the political reality. They're saying it's between $4 and $5 trillion. So she's absolutely right on this. They know what this cost is, and it's not paid for. So I saw yesterday the liberal wing of Pelosi's party is demanding that they will vote against the bill if they don't have if the parliamentarian in the Senate doesn't include amnesty for these 15 million illegal immigrants that have come across here. So I don't know how that's going to work out with it. I don't know what's going to happen. The fact that for the first time since 76, they've taken out the Hyde Amendment, which is the federal funding of abortions. We banned that. That's been banned in the Hyde Amendment. Has been banned since 1976. It's not in the legislation now. It's the first time someone has taken it out. And so we've talked to some Democrats on the other side over in the Senate, and they're going to put that bill in. If that gets in, I don't know what the future could be when it comes over. I've talked to some Democrats in the House side, and they say if there's federal funding for abortion on that, they're going to vote against the bill. So it's going to be interesting how this thing all plays out. It's a chess game going on in the Senate right now. We've got to be careful about what we're doing and don't do things by some political deadline. Shelley's right, and other people. Study it further. Don't rush to do this. This is going to transform our economy. That's why I voted against it. I know Shelley's going to be voting against it. This thing has to be kept separate from the infrastructure. And I think so far, I'm hoping we're going to be effective doing that.
Well, thank you. And you both would probably be pretty interested. Last week, we had Chris Steyerwalt join us for the Chamber's board retreat. And you just mentioned the cost of this bill being between 4 and 5 trillion. Something that really put it in perspective for me is Chris said the entire cost adjusted for inflation for the United States to fight World War II and rebuild Europe through the Marshall Plan was $4.5 trillion in today's dollars. And I mean, so that just kind of puts in perspective of how much money that really is. It's when we have a debt in the 30 trillion range, it's easy to forget, but that puts it in perspective. I know we're running almost out of time, so just maybe one final question. If we could go ahead and start with you, Congressman. This is an issue we're hearing from our members about workforce. And so the question is, do we have the workforce in West Virginia right now to be able to get in and start putting these projects forward?
No, we have some problems with workforce. And that's one of the things that I give credit to over on the Senate side. People like Shelley talking about is that why would we eliminate the workforce requirement on Medicare for the welfare payments? That it's worked, it's kept people in the workforce. So I want to make sure that gets back into it. The House did not, it said you don't have to work to get your welfare payment. I think the work requirement needs to be put back into it. But let's go further. That underscores why this issue is resonating with me, is when President Biden wants to put this mandate on vaccines. If you don't get a vaccine, you can't go to work in healthcare. I think if a hospital wants to do that, that's their call. But I don't think the federal government should be mandating the vaccine. I think individually people need to make that decision. So I think that's going to restrict our workforce. As far as think about that all across in healthcare, our military, our border security. It blows my mind to think about border security. We're going to make sure we have fewer guards because for whatever reason, they don't want to get vaccinated, so they can't work. But yet we're letting people come across the border and we're not requiring them to get vaccinated. They're bringing in diseases that I can't even pronounce what those might be that they're introducing to this country. So we've got to watch this mandate on vaccinations. But as far as the workforce, I have all the confidence in the world that, having come from the construction industry, we'll be able to build everything that we need, because in our industry, people, what we refer to, they boom around the country. They move from job to job. They're going to come to West Virginia to build Corridor H or the Coal King Highway. They're going to be here when we put in water lines. So they're going to come from all the parts of the country. And quite frankly, I hope they stay. They're going to find out the beauty of our state, the opportunities that are here, the cost of living, the tax rate is lower. I hope they stay, but you're going to see people come from all around. But first and foremost, getting the jobs here and getting the work done is going to be very important.
I don't really have much to add there. I think David's got it. We did just pass out yesterday, 52-48, a taking down of the president's vaccine mandate on private employers. It's coming over to the House. I hope you guys take it up and pass it. It's going to be tough, but it absolutely is. I think it's over 40% of West Virginia workers could be impacted by this. I had a telephone town hall and people are very, very, very concerned about this. I'll just put this on everybody's radar screen. I don't have the answer here, but if you read the statistics of the numbers of millions of people that have dropped out of the workforce starting in August, September, October, it's 4 million a month. There's something going on here that's beyond people retiring or people just not wanting to work. I think that the pandemic has had. I'd love to, if anybody has any good articles on this, I'd love to read them. On the pandemic has caused a shift in our workforce, and so I think that means more flexibility for the workforce, more kinds of retraining and opportunities in different fields for the workforce. But for some reason, millions of people are just saying, I'm not doing this anymore. And And so I think that's something we really need in terms of having the workforce. We do not have it in West Virginia. I congratulate the community colleges in West Virginia that are trying to turn programs around quickly in response to what workforce development entities need in the immediate. But I think it's a bigger, more systemic problem, and I think we need to really focus on it.
Well, just to wrap up, thank you both so much for everything you do for West Virginia, for being leaders on this very important infrastructure bill. This was an outstanding discussion. Steve here, I'm not sure if his voice is back. For those listening, Steve had lost his voice about 15 minutes before the call. But again, just want to thank both of you for your leadership, for everything you do, and for your friendship. And just for anybody who still has an outstanding question, I hope neither the congressman or the senator mind, but we can just tell you their staffs are incredibly accessible. Anytime we have a question, we can easily get through. I'm sure that's the case for anyone of you who may still have a question or an issue pressing. So with that, thank you both so much for your time, and keep up the good fight.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity. See you guys.
Thank you very much.
See you, David.
Thank
Everyone, be safe out there and have a good Christmas. I hope everyone can celebrate safely. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh.